Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting and sight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I'm Dan Sams.
And I apologize for not being available for our listeners last week. I'm in the middle of moving to a free state, so I just, life's crazy. In fact, I'm still waiting for my painters to show up. They'll probably show up right in the middle of our podcast today. And they got some work they got to finish up. But, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do?
You're right to roll with it. You know what? We're not complaining, Pete, because I don't think anybody gave the POWs in World War II a hard time when they didn't make their podcast because they were planning their escape. I would say about your situation. People on the east side of the Berlin Wall trying to dig tunnels underneath. We weren't complaining that they weren't doing a radio broadcast, at the appointed time. We were just glad that they were making their escape. So
I guess so, man. I guess so. It's kind of crazy though. There's probably a little bit more of an echo on my audio than normal. And my good mic is packed up. So I got to use this little cheap mic, whatever this one is. And there's nothing in my office. Like you can see behind me, there's nothing left in here. I got an extra chair and that's it. So it's really echoey in here. But so our stager wanted us to repaint the house. She's like, not the outside, the inside. She's like, you got to repaint the inside. And the reality is we lived here for 16 years and we never painted it. Right. So, and the people who sold it were thinking the exact same thing that we were thinking, which is what's the cheapest way to paint the inside of my house? Like that's how it was done 16 years ago. They were just like, oh, what's the cheapest way? And what's the cheapest paint? And so that's how they painted it. And we did nothing about it because, what do we care? Right.
Yeah.
And so last week we had this church plant. They came up and they've been painting like crazy. And I've been painting right with them. Even though we're painting them, I'm like, yeah, look, I gotta get this done. I got to get out of this place. So I was taping off everything that I could, painting just like they were. And I finished most everything up over the weekend. When they come today, they've got they're going to replace some drywall stuff and finish up some last little trim. And then really we should be done. So we're planning on taking pictures on Wednesday and open house Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And, hopefully somebody will want to buy my house for way more money than I would ever buy it for. And then we'll find some place out in Texas and come move after school's over. So that's the game plan, man.
Good stuff, man. Praise the Lord for it.
And I need a whole lot of extra money so I can buy all the guns that I want to buy in Texas that I can't get here in California.
Exactly right. And
my one friend was like, you know what? You should sell the guns in California that you can get a premium on and then just rebuy them in Texas when you can buy them at normal prices. And I'm like, now you're thinking.
It's not a bad idea.
Because I could probably get my Glock 48 in its current condition with all the extras I got on it, $1,100, maybe $1,200. My Glock 43, easy $850 all day long. So, then I can just go rebuy them in a free state because you can't get those guns here in California unless you buy them from a private party, which is why we call it the California tax. You double and triple it.
I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think that's a bad idea at all, Pete.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll hey, if any of our California listeners want a Glock 48 or a Glock 43, reach out to me.
Yeah.
I might be able to just do a little private party transfer. Obviously, we'll do it at an FFL here in Orange County. I ain't going to jail.
Yep.
And anyway, man, so I got to tell you real quick, I got an interesting little story for you. And I need to be really, really vague on this. So in the last week, right, I'm going to leave it really vague. In the last week, I was talking with someone, I'm gonna really make this fake, who is currently in law enforcement.
All right.
And it was really interesting because because of the circumstances, I couldn't say everything I was thinking. But it was interesting listening to someone in law enforcement say, talk about how things have changed, what they like, what they don't like. And I kid you not, here's one of the things one of the stories I was given. Oh man, it used to be so great. Like we'd pull guys over, put them on the curb, search their cars. There's no probable cause. And, but we could do it. They give us the freedom to do it. And we'd take guns off the streets. And I mean, we didn't care if they had drugs. All we cared about were the guns. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, dude, I don't care if you were stereotyping those people, which is what they were doing, right? They were basically pulling over gangbangers. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to violate the Fourth Amendment. And I'm just going to search their stuff and put them in jail. Like, and it's funny listening to it from his point of view, because he's ultra conservative like me, but like to the point where I mean, I don't even know what you'd call that. That's not even conservative anymore. That's just it's
hypocrisy.
That's tyranny at that point.
It's the same thing that we see, and unfortunately we do see it a lot in conservatives, where they have it is like a religious dogma where, there's some flag worship, there's some whatever. And there's the idea that like, well, this is good because it's patriotic and it's conservative, right? Gangbangers are bad. Whatever it takes to get rid of them is good. Like that, there's this kind of a rote approach to it. And the idea of precedence, the idea that like, man, if you're violating the Fourth Amendment to get rid of gangbangers, has it even crossed your mind that like that sets a precedence that somebody who doesn't like you can do it to you later for something totally different?
Well, because think about it. How do you know they're gangbangers? You're totally stereotyping.
Exactly right.
Oh, we got a bunch of black guys in a car. Let's pull them over. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Yeah. Or, here in LA, it could be any other race other than white.
Yeah. Is
essentially what they're coming down to.
Well, and then think about how many times people get mischaracterized. Happens all the time. And we've seen it in even other things. I remember listening to a podcast where somebody was talking about doing a ride along with a couple of police officers, and they see black guy who's walking down the street with a white kid. And I mean, they basically just stop and harass him. Now, here's a journalist who's watching it happen. Like the journalist is there observing, and they just keep hassling this guy. And the kid's like, this is my mom's boyfriend, Carl, or whatever his name is. Like, he takes care of me. He brings me home from school. Like, he's basically a family member. And they're like, well, we don't. And they just harass for like 30 minutes. I think at one point they have him in cuffs, whatever. They end up like having, like, the kid is like, would you call my mom? Like, this is one of my guardians. And the guy's just trying to not, get beat up by the cops. So he's being as compliant as possible. And they call the mom and she's like, what are you doing? Yeah, like that's like he's taking him, like he's supposed to be taking my son home. Why are you harassing him? You have no reason to stop him. And they finally, because like now the mom is like, this is my boyfriend, let him be. And so they let him go. They get back in the car, and the journalist he's like, I'm just sitting there quietly. And they're like, you know what, man, this still doesn't seem right to me. And it's like, what is wrong with you? Like, we have that kind of stuff. And the thing is, you're putting a lot of power into the hands of people who are not necessarily thinking in terms of, I need to find a nicer way to say it than what's in my mind.
Yeah. Well, what was interesting too, and the guy is a cool guy. Like, he and I totally hit it off. We had a great time chatting. We probably talked for, 2 hours. Talked about all kinds of stuff. He's a gun nut just like me. I mean, like, we hit it off in every other way. It's just there are some things where I was like, yeah, I'm not with you on this one, and we see that a lot though out there. And it's like, okay, that's where I draw the line, man. That's where it's like, no, we have to respect people's rights. That's what we do in our society.
Well, and I would say some of this for me comes back to my theology, that I believe that if somebody's doing something wrong, yes, I want them to be caught and punished, right? Of course, a lot of the things that
Can you talk a little closer to your mic? You're really starting to fade out on me, man.
Sorry, how's that right there?
That's much better.
Yeah. So, in kind of my view of things, and I would say the biblical concept is that God's going to get his justice eventually. So that I have to recognize, then I want the law to be applied as righteously as possible, with the recognition that means sometimes bad guys are going to get away, right? There's going to be gangbangers that get to move some crack, that get to have guns and do things that are bad. And we're not always going to catch them because we're applying a just approach, right? So I'm not going to do illegal search and seizure. And I have to be okay with that, knowing that like God's going to punish them eventually in this life or the next. And now, while I want our governing structures to do the things they're supposed to do, I take some peace in like, okay, yeah, I recognize they're not going to catch everybody. But I'm thankful for the fact that we've got these rules that keep them from being able to harass us, or where they used to be.
Right. Okay, now my dog's got to start barking. Boy, are my dogs barking. Yeah. So anyway, I thought it was interesting. So we had that. Oh my gosh, dog! Will you knock it off? Yeah. I see you. You're a big dog. You're a big dog. I don't know if that means my painters are here or what, but anyway.
All right,
we had that shooting here in Sacramento I guess it was over the weekend. And I find it really interesting that it's obviously a gang-related shooting, and yet they're going after guns. And they're like, oh, guns are the problem. Look, we got to have more gun laws. California's got the strictest gun laws in the nation, and yet we still have these shootings. In other words, you're admitting the gun laws don't work? What? Like even this cop, and he and I were talking, he's like, are you a CCW, concealed carry weapons licensee? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, yeah, that's the only way to be, man. You got to be safe around here. And I'm like, totally. I mean, I'm not even saying that having a gun is going to protect me or my family, but at least I have a shot, right? At least I'm not completely a victim. He's like, yeah, it's going to take forever for the cops to get there. By then it's over. I'm like, exactly. That's why I'm a CCW guy.
Yep. And why we train.
Exactly.
What I think one of the things that I think
you got to speak closer to the mic, man. You are really fading out.
I'm not sure why it's not picking me up today. It's strange. Hold on. Does that sound any better?
Oh yeah, that's much louder. Like, yeah, seriously, much louder.
Yeah. All right. So here's what's on my mind related to that. Training is also key. So a lot of people think, well, I'll call the cops. Well, I know that at best I've got maybe 6 minutes there, right? So then other people are like, well, I'll have a gun. I'm like, okay, but do you have it on you? We're like, no, I have it in the car. I'm like, well, that's worthless, right? And then I'm like, then the next phase is like, well, they have a gun, but they're ankle carrying, right? And then the next phase is they're 3 o'clock carrying or appendix carrying, but they're never training. And I'm like, what you have in a bad situation is maybe 2 or 3 seconds, right? If somebody's coming after you, you have such a small fraction of time. And so I'm like, train, man, practice the quick draw, be ready to move fast, because that's what's going to save your life. Not a cop, not having a gun. With nothing in the chamber, right? Like there's all these things where I'm like, guys, you have to think like you only have 2 seconds, because that's probably all you're going to have.
And the reality too is, and people really need to think about this, if your assailant already has their gun out and pointed at you, do not try and draw your weapon. You can't beat someone who's literally got a gun pointed at you. It's not going to happen. It at best, at your quickest, you're looking at a 1.5 seconds, and they're looking at maybe 1/10 to 2/10 of a second to pull that trigger all the way back. You can't beat that. Like, they're literally going to be 5 to 6 times faster than you. And the reality is most people don't train, and they're not at a 1.5 seconds to get from concealment to get their weapon out. And like you said, what if they don't have one in the chamber? Forget it, dude. What, you're going to rack it and get your shot? No, you're dead. You're literally dead. So in that case, if they already got their gun out, you're just totally compliant.
Yep.
Now, if they happen to turn their direction somewhere else, turn their attention to someone else, I mean, case by case, right? Case by case on that. But seriously, man, it's too late. And you got to think about this stuff ahead of time. If they got their gun out, it's too late. You can't do anything.
Well, and I can just point to actual data for myself. I am training and I'm at like 1.87 seconds, right? And I've been training a decent amount right now. That's to pull out and shoot well. Like I can do 1.5 and it not necessarily have it go where I want it to go, right?
Right. But I mean, also, if we're talking about within that, 3 to 7 yards, 1.5, there's not a lot of aiming you got to do.
That's true. I mean, at that point, yeah, it's a little bit different, which is part of why we train to shoot, from close and then aiming later. There's a lot of things built into that.
Retention, shooting from retention, all that stuff. Absolutely.
Compared that to surprise break practice that I do, 0.25 seconds, right? So, I mean, you're exactly right. 4, 5, 6, 7, probably 5, 6 times faster when somebody's already pointing the gun. Just simple as that. Can't beat that with a draw, man, no matter who you are, no matter how fast you are. So train, which if I'm not careful, I'm going to go on another bragging on the Mantis again, because I am having a ball with it.
Dude, I went to their site. So you'd sent me that Instagram post that said, hey, if you're one of our original Mantis buyers, we'll give you a credit for the original Mantis if you want to upgrade to the new one. Their site, they still honor that. It's down there at the bottom on their site. It's in the footer. They'll honor it. And I'm like, dude, that's sweet, because I just found it as I'm getting everything moved. I'm like, all right, I'm going to upgrade.
So when you bought it, it was $100, right? For that original?
Honestly, I don't remember. I don't remember.
And so you're upgrading to the 260 something. So
whatever one that you got, I'm sure that's the one that I'll get.
It's the X10 Elite, man. And I mean, it's like the one that does everything. So man, you didn't lose a dime then.
No,
I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for them. That's some great business running.
It really is.
So I do have a fun story. So I'm training last week and I realized I start getting into all the groups. So you can get into the group for Walther shooters, Walther P22 shooters, whatever. And I realized, I get in the Walther group and I see that the list of shooters goes down a ways. And based on benchmark, dude, I'm number 2.
Really?
So I was like, well, that's not bad. And here's what was interesting, though. The guy who's number 1 is shooting nearly twice as much as me.
Ooh.
Right? So that tells you something. I'm doing pretty good. Now I'm trying to catch up with him a little bit, but that dude is pulling the trigger nearly twice as much as me. And he had, on his benchmark score, he probably had 3 percentage points higher. So it does all come back to practice. So anyway, though, I scroll down, I'm like, okay, so there's 25 people in the group. It's not a huge group. But I screenshot it. I showed my wife. I'm like, hey, check it out. Right. Well, then I'm also in a group for P22 shooters. And for whatever reason, there's not a group for my, PPSM2. Anyway, so I realize I'm number 1 for the P22 shooters. And so I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, baby, guess what? I'm number 1 in the world for this type of gun shooting. And she looks at me and she's like, and how many people are in that group? And I raise up my hand holding up 2 fingers. She's like, yep.
I wonder how big the Glock group is. That's got to be pretty good.
I can only imagine. Actually, the Mantis released data, and I was actually reading the article. They released data from however many million trigger pulls. They essentially pulled the data for everything over the course of a year. And they were able to point to what type of shooters had the best. They were like, what type of guns basically people tend to shoot better at. That was kind of cool. Who was shooting the most? Glock was, of course, 2/3 of the shooters were all shooting Glocks. But it was actually really interesting to look at some of the data. And they got into how many trigger pulls it takes to get to a certain level. And they were essentially at 3,000 pulls, you are almost always at this level. At 5,000, you're at this level. And then they were tracing people who had gotten up high enough and then didn't practice as much and then would come back in. And so they would say they would come back in lower. And essentially they were it's a perishable skill. It comes from practice. It's kept with practice. And I think it was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of great data out there. If you search, Mantis records or whatever, they've got a lot. Like, I don't know who else in the world is getting that kind of data for shooters.
Right.
Like, there's just nothing like it.
Right.
And I did finally get out yesterday because my thought is like, I'm judging myself on just the Mantis data. Am I actually getting better? And like I thought, I'm going to hit the range and do some real world checks. And so I went out with my pistol, fired about 50 rounds yesterday, and man, I was ringing that cowbell. I thought we're just going to keep it simple. Dude, I've never been this good in my life. Simple as that. Now it is interesting. Like, now once you put recoil into the game, now getting back on is a little bit more, even with the smallest of recoil. So it's funny. My numbers are not as good when I'm live fire practicing. I go from like,
of course,
80s and 90s to 70s and 80s, and then an occasional like high 90, mid 90. But yeah, man, can't wait for you to get yours, Pete. We could start a group on there for the Freedom Nation.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
And I will. Now, the reality is I probably won't until after I'm done with all this home sale crap, because my life right now is literally cleaning, painting, all that. Like tomorrow I got to go rent a carpet cleaner and I got to just start cleaning carpets. Wednesday, they're taking pictures. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Easter Sunday, open house. So I'm like, let the Lord bring the right person to the house on Easter. That's fine with me.
Yep. Oh man, there's a good chance you're going to sell that thing quick. That's what I'm hoping for you.
I'm hoping it sells quick, and I'm hoping it sells for an absurd amount of money. Yeah. Because my neighborhood they've lost their minds. Like, I think I told you that the house down the street from mine, about 4 or 5 houses down, it listed at 1.3, which based on a per square foot size would put my house at 1.7, which is absurd. Like, my house is not a $1.7 million house. It's just not. Flat out, it's not. And it sold for apparently well over 1.3. We don't know exactly yet because the realtor won't disclose it. Obviously, it hasn't closed yet. Another house in my community listed at 1.45, apparently sold for over 1.6. My community has lost its mind. And I'm hoping someone still loses their mind when it comes to buying my house.
What I'm thinking. But
you never know, right? I mean, I don't know. And honestly, I'm at that point where I'm like, look, God, it's all in your hands, because there's only so much I can do. And I just got to leave it up to you. And that's literally where I feel right now.
Yeah, man. I think though about what you could get if you sell your house for $1.5 million, what you're going to be able to get in Texas for that.
Well, I'm not buying $1.5 million in Texas. I'll tell you that.
Exactly.
The whole point of moving there is to, make my life easier. I want as small a mortgage as possible.
Yeah. But man, seriously, let's say you buy a house for $300K down there.
Well, you can't. There's nothing for $300K.
You know what? I'm thinking about Ohio.
Well, you know what? It's changed so much. Like, because of the pandemic, like, basically I told our realtor, I don't want anything more than 800. And so all of my searches are 800 or lower. Yep. And the reality is I want one in that 6 to 725 range. I mean, that would be my ideal sweet spot. I don't want to actually go up to 800 unless I absolutely have to. But yeah, that's going to get me a larger house than I have here, more bedrooms, more bathrooms, hopefully a pool. What can I say? It's we'll see, right? And again, buying a house, I got to leave that up to God, because it's crazy right now. All the markets are crazy. So now you got to deal with all the other buyers who want to buy. And, it is what it is. So, We'll see. We'll see what happens. Who knows?
Could be good. We're hoping for something good for you, man. We're praying. It's good. Just excited to see you getting out of.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like, literally proof that there's a God and he wants me to be happy. He changed my wife's mind. Like, in 22 years of marriage, she's never been willing to leave. And now she is.
I should tell you how bad it's getting in California, man.
Yeah.
Man.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how are we on time here? We got to talk about a couple of other things.
Yeah, let's do it.
So first of all, just because the news is just hitting, got notification that, hold hold on, let me make sure I'm on the right. Yeah, released today. Apparently, there's more info coming out of the White House about trying to ban ghost guns. Essentially, going to require serializing quote unquote ghost guns, whether they're 3D printed or whatever. But it looks like it has to do with if it goes through a gun store later, which I'm like, when is that ever going to happen? So I'm not sure that they have a good handle on what's going on, but worth paying attention. They're rattling the saber related to unserialized lower receivers. So keep an eye out, everybody.
Yeah. They really hate those, especially here in California. I mean, I don't even know how many blanks for both AR and basically, you know, the Glock 19, maybe Glock 17. I don't remember frames. I got a couple of different ones. I got the GS9. I got, I believe, 1 or 2 polymer 80s, totally unfinished. Like I haven't touched them because it's illegal in California to do that unless I get it serialized. And I refuse to do that. But I wanted the blanks. I want to be ready. So when I get to Texas, I'm going to be doing, I got an AR-9. I got at least 5 AR-15 blanks. Mm-hmm. I mean, dude, my gun repertoire is going to go back up, you know, a good amount of firearms.
Well, be aware. So here's the word they're saying. It says this morning, President Biden announced a ban on quote unquote ghost guns, unlicensed kits to create guns at home in an effort to prevent untraceable firearms. So it says what would now need to happen to sell a gun kit? Commercial manufacturers of them must be licensed, including serial numbers, and conduct a background check prior to sale. So I'm wondering, how's this going to affect 80% Arms and others? It says the rule applies to all ghost guns, regardless of how it was made, which can include 3D printing as well as kits. I just think it's funny that they think they're going to be able to do something about 3D printed lowers. So we'll see. They're trying to ban them. They can't. But that's going to be
There's nothing they can do. It's saber rattling. And honestly, it is going to give them a tool that they can use later to incarcerate people. I mean, that's all they want to do is how dare you have a firearm? Only I get to have firearms. I mean, that's really what it is. Like I found it interesting when I was talking to that cop. He can go buy 30-round mags. Mm-hmm. And whatever they just keep track of it. Oh, okay, you bought 3 on this date. And I guess there's production codes on some of the mag pulls and stuff like that. And but he as a cop, he can go buy those stuff that the rest of us in California can't. And to me, it just goes to show, so you can't use the argument, there's no reason you would ever need a 30-round mag. Mm-hmm. Well, then why do you have it? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, because no. If there's no need, then you don't need it either.
Exactly right.
Which, by the way, is what Hawaii's tried to do. Hawaii's tried to give their cops only 10-round mags. Like you can't, as a cop, have anything larger than 10 rounds. It's like,
and if I'm a criminal, I am taking note of that.
Exactly. Okay, he's out. He just shot off 11 times. Let's go to town. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Oh, it really is. So something to pay attention to, everybody. The concern over what I think you're right that like they can't really stop it, but man, if they catch you, they're going to want to prosecute you hard. Because it's all about being able to prosecute you after the fact. Yeah. And that's concerning.
I mean, God forbid you should actually protect yourself or your family member with a ghost gun. Oh. You're the one that's going to go to jail. Yep.
So it's interesting that all this is happening when New Jersey is in the process of legalizing infanticide, if you're following anything going on with that. And New Jersey is also requiring schools to teach on transgender issues. We got some real wonky stuff going on that, what's the old saying is like when the government's trying to take your guns, it's because they're about to do something that you would shoot them for.
Right.
They're already doing it, man. And it's a big problem.
It is.
So keep your ghost guns in mind. Right?
Keep your ghost guns and get more.
Yeah, buy some for me. Buy extras, stockpile them, do whatever you need to do. Get them ready. Have your jig. Yeah, what a time. Yeah, some weird things going on. So anyway, and there was we also probably needed to talk about Sacramento shooting, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, the main thing that I noticed on that is, again, they're trying to blame the gun. And it's like, this was a gang thing. Like, do you really think banning guns from law-abiding citizens is going to stop a gang war, a gang fight? I don't even know if it's a war, just a gang fight between gang members. I mean, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
Like, do you think they sit there and go, oh, wait a second, this is a gun-free zone. I can't take a gun here. Of course not. They're criminals. They're not going to pay attention to any of the laws. And like you were saying before the podcast, they can pretty much get anything they want, including full auto.
Yep. I remember, I mean, not long ago, I was having conversations with guys who are not in the country right now, but friends of mine, former gang members who've turned their life around. And I remember like, it was like nothing. They're like, oh man, if I wanted a full auto AK, I mean, we just went and got it. Like there wasn't, I mean, we had a guy and it was no problem.
Right.
Like that was, and I remember thinking like, and he was, I mean, he was in California. I'm thinking like you were in one of the most anti-gun states in possibly the most anti-gun city. And you had whatever you wanted. Like, right. Wasn't even an issue. And probably for cheaper than what we would have found it.
Well, full auto obviously would be cheaper, right? Because it's going to cost us $25,000 to buy a full auto.
Yeah.
Because we're going to do it legally. And we all know that the autos here cost what, $50 to make? I mean,
not much at all.
Yeah. So of course I can get it cheaper. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. So that's I
will say this though. I am looking forward to getting to Texas, becoming a resident of the state, and I am going to build an SBR with a suppressor because I can get an NFA item. And it's just like, I'm going to build my own. Like it's going to be a build my own SBR with suppressor, do it totally legal, go through the ATF and get the NFA stamp, all that stuff. And that's going to be my home protection weapon.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm finally going to be able to do that.
And chambered in 9mm? What are you going to chamber it in?
Probably 5.56.
Oh yeah.
I want it to go through you and the guy behind you.
Exactly right. That's my thought. I prefer.
Wait, why am I limiting myself? Why not both?
Yeah, why not both, man? Well, because the nice thing is if you do it in 9mm with a can on it and you fire some subsonic ammo, you're actually bringing the volume down pretty significantly.
Right, significantly.
You can do a lot with that. But 5.56 is awesome because it goes through things. It's pretty great.
Why have just one?
I know.
Why just have one? That's all I'm saying.
You run the 5.56, let your wife run the 9mm.
That would be so hot. That would just
awesome.
be hot.
Yeah, brother.
Yeah.
Man, every time I can get my wife shooting, man, I'm a happy man. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Good stuff, brother. Well, I think that covers everything today. We need some new exciting things. I'll just say this. There's so much insanity going on in the world that at some point it's redundant to talk about all of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
True.
It's like, more insanity. Yeah, our government's doing more insanity. Yeah, they're like legalizing the most heinous things you can imagine while they're penalizing doing what's right. And if that doesn't make you mad, I don't know what else does. But at some point you just get tired of, acknowledging it. And and then I'm like, okay, so what's going to happen?
Right.
You know what I mean? So anyway, all that said, exciting news at Lake Erie Arms. Check out the website, learms.net. Sign up for training, whatever, but really, really more exciting stuff coming up. And here in May, you will be able to buy that new exciting stuff. So more on that later, but check out learms.net. Appreciate those guys and all the good work they're doing.
Cool. All right, guys, we'll be back next week with another episode. We'll talk to you then. Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.